Fresh Economic Thinking podcast, new ideas and analysis with Dr. Cameron Murray and Jonathan Gadir.
Does financial independence and retiring early sound good to you? I'm Cameron Murray, and today I have Matt from Aussie Firebug, who's going to teach me about a movement called FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early. I met Matt a couple of years ago online, and we talked about superannuation, and I wanted to get him on the podcast to talk about this financial independence movement. Matt, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Cam. Thanks for having me.
I'm really curious. How does one get into the FIRE movement? How old were you? Was this a high school hobby? Was it something that started later? And what's its philosophy? Why is it different from just common sense budgeting?
Yeah, so it's funny, Cam, because I've been talking about FIRE I've been writing about it and doing podcasts for over 7 or 8 years now, I think. And I've been consuming it for well over a decade. And back then, like 2013 is when I first come across it. No one knew what FIRE was, but I have a feeling now that if you're into personal finance, you've come across the term before. And the reason I feel as though it's like entered the mainstream of personal finance is because there is a show on Netflix about FIRE. So I feel like that's when the movement has sort of made it. If it's on Netflix, it's entered pop culture. But essentially, to answer your question, I'll start off with what FIRE is and a little bit of history behind it. I think I don't know if there's definitively one person that created the term financial independence retire early, but my historic context of it was probably Mr. Money Mustache, he's actually Canadian, but he lives in the United States. He is what I would consider to be the founder of the modern day FIRE movement. Some people will trace it back to Vicki Robbins, who wrote a very famous book called Your Money or Your Life in the 90s. And that espoused a lot of the philosophies of FIRE, which is essentially, it's more of a life philosophy. You hit the nail on the head in the intro, than it is sort of nuts and bolts investing, because it's essentially saying that if you mix in common sense, personal finance, and you live a simple life, and sort of the whole idea of the movement is to ultimately be happy and satisfied with your life. That's where you're trying to get to. And you can achieve that by mastering your money. It just so happens that mastering your money is very important to live a happy and fulfilling life. But it's not only about money. It's, living a simple life, being as efficient as you can. Sustainability plays a role. Even stoicism is in there as well. It means slightly different things to different people. But I would say that's my take on the whole movement. And I first come across it in 2013. I read a blog, Mr. Money Mustache's blog, and that really, dived down the rabbit hole of the whole movement. And there's a whole bunch of content creators, bloggers, podcasters, YouTubers out of the movement. And I started my blog and podcast in 2015 because no one in Australia was writing about it back then. And that's a little bit of history 101.
Yeah, right. So that's super interesting because my upbringing there's some parallels. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki came out when I was 15. And my dad was also very much into financial independence and investment, and realizing that most people go through life working and spending and ending up with nothing and having no freedom for themselves. So I had biologically and culturally absorbed this idea by the time I'd finished school. My dad actually made all of us children buy a house when we were 19. Gave us $30,000 and said, if you don't do this, you're a fool. And as a smart ass teenager, it sounds a bit much, but it was definitely the right thing to do. And it forced me to grow up and be responsible for money and responsible in general. Like, I had to learn how to repair leaky taps and all that sort of stuff
Mm.
instantly. So for me, it was sort of second nature. And I assume I recommend, and I'll put a link in the show notes to Matt's latest podcast. Financial independence doesn't mean scrimp and save while you're young and then retire later. And when I was young, I had that idea. I just thought, oh, geez, when I have $1 million, I'll retire when I'm 30 and I can live a hobo lifestyle for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Exactly.
Your philosophy is changing now. Or maybe there's a more mature version than my 19-year-old version of, oh, this is great. I'm going to make all this money in 10 years. And then once I've got $1 million, I can live, just as I did as a couch surfing teenager for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So tell me about, it's not a linear thing, right? This philosophy, it's not work hard, scrimp and save and then retire. So tell me about your story there.
Yeah. So definitely my philosophy and story has evolved throughout my journey. I mean, me and my wife have been on this journey since I first come across the movement over a decade ago. So over 10 years. And what drove me to find an alternative path in life, because that's really what FIRE is. And again, I'll go back to Mr. Money Mustache, is sort of the head figure of the movement. He is the first one, really. I'd come across other blogs before. There's Early Retirement Extreme, which is written by Jacob, another American. There's a few other blogs that I'd come across when I was 21, 22, and they were interesting, but they were a bunch of guys saving 90% of their income, which is crazy to do that, scrimping and sort of living a life that didn't really appeal to me. So I looked at the math and I was, really into the analytics side of things. I was like, oh, that's cool. What's possible? But I want to travel. I want to do this. I want to do that. It doesn't really appeal to me. Mr. Money Mustache was the first one that I seen that he was living an awesome life whilst also saving a decent amount, like 60 to 70% of his income. But he was living a great life. And he really mixed in the philosophy of a fantastic life. A fantastic life doesn't actually cost that much money. And we've sort of been warped by the marketing machine that you need all these things until you get to be happy. You need the latest car. You need the latest iPhone. Everyone knows the marketing machine at play here. So when he wrote about it, it just really spoke to me. And that's why he's so popular. I think he really spoke to a lot of people to be like, no, there's actually a different way to live. And it's this, being smart with your money, being frugal, being, to your point, Cam, being able to fix things yourself, not necessarily having to outsource everything in your life because you don't know how to do things, like start using your hands, build, maintain things, buy quality items that last a long time, not just the cheapest item that will, break in a year, et cetera, et cetera. So the way that it evolved for me is I was in a job straight out of uni. I didn't necessarily hate the job. In fact, there was aspects of the job that I quite enjoyed. I liked the people that I work with, but it never inspired me. I never really felt satisfaction in the job. And when I finished uni, and I don't know if you'd be the same, Cam, interested to hear your thoughts, but it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. When I finished, I was at uni for 4 years, and you're going to class, you're going to parties on Tuesday night, you're playing Call of Duty to 3:00 in the morning with all your mates on Friday. It's like the best time ever. And then you enter the workforce and suddenly it's 38 hours a week, but it's not really only 38 hours a week. I was commuting 50 minutes each way. So nearly 2 hours a day, de-stressing from work, getting ready for work. So in reality, it's like closer to 70 hours a week. And when you go from being a uni student, like a bum, couch surfer, as you said, Cam, to that 70 hours a week dedicated, like majority of your time is at work, that's not really inspiring you. I couldn't get over the fact that people were doing this. I was looking around and, people were, some of them were like decently happy, I guess, but nothing was inspiring me. And I just felt like an urgency, like I am not going to do this for 40 years. There has to be an alternative way to live your life. And that's where I went looking for answers. And I actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was the first book that I ever read about personal finance. And that's sort of the concept of financial independence is where I learned it there. And then I come across the FIRE crowd later, which was like, how do you utilize financial independence to live a better life? Because for me, that there's a separate, there's a separation between the financial independence part and the retire early part. So financial independence for me is purely about mastering money, and it's a means to an end. And I can speak a little bit about what that looks like for me at the moment, because I feel like I've reached that end now. I don't particularly, I'm not interested in money content anymore as much as I would. I'll always be a money nerd, finance nerd, but I was consuming these, pieces of content, podcasts, articles, YouTube videos every single day in my early 20s because I was obsessed with it. It was like a goal, laser focused on reaching financial independence. But now I've moved on to other things because we've reached a financial position, me and my wife. I can give numbers, and I don't, I say these things not to brag, but just to give context for listeners. So last financial year, we got around $43,000 in dividends. That is not completely covering the costs of our living expenses, but it's over 75%. So I'm at a position now, me and my family, where I can really take the foot off the gas pedal and start to explore what does my life look like when I'm not working for money being the primary motivator, and how do I create a lifestyle that I always dreamt about in my 20s. So I've got the cash flow now to enable this. And how do I create that lifestyle to live the most satisfied and happiest life possible? And actually, for people out there listening, it's actually harder than you think. Might sound like a dream to be in this position, and I am truly blessed to be in it. But it's once you have that structure taken away from you that work provides for so many people, there's actually a few more difficulties that come. And I think that's pretty much my story and philosophy in a nutshell. Started off absolutely obsessed about reaching financial independence, and then throughout the journey, we can speak about this a little bit. I fell recently. This is a recent phenomenon. I fell in love with work for the first time in my life a few years ago, and it sort of flipped my perspective a little bit on the whole movement. And now I've got a family, which happened very recently, 9 weeks ago. My wife gave birth to our beautiful daughter, and I've become a father. So thank you very much. So it's a whole new journey now. Yeah. Anything you wanted to drill down on that?
Yeah, look, that's quite amazing. I think we have so many parallels in our lives. There's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. First, what I'm hearing is you really got into the culture of FIRE. How important was that? Because what I'm trying to say is that to break free from the culture of work, spend, don't save, do you have to immerse yourself in another culture that deeply to, or is it something that anyone can just do? Oh, yeah, no, I feel like I should save more and invest. And is it something you can casually break free from? Or do you think the fact that you were so into it gave you the confidence to act differently to everyone else? Because it's hard when people invite you to things, they expect you to spend on certain things. When you have a certain job, you're expected to have a certain car or live in a certain area. And do you think you needed that support of the culture and being so into it? Or could you have just done this, casually without being, so entrenched in the FIRE movement?
I would say that without the FIRE movement, I definitely wouldn't have got as far, or me and my wife wouldn't have got as far as we did in the time frame. I think I'm a naturally frugal person, and I have been blessed to find a wife that is relatively frugal. Not on my level, because I was just insane in my 20s, and I can tell you some stories, Cam, that were just crazy. Like they're just stupid levels. I mean, okay, I'll give you one, and they're so dumb because it doesn't move the needle. I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you want to save a lot of money, like housing and transport is your big ticket items. Like go after your big ticket, your holidays, your food and drink. They're the big ticket items. What I would do, I'll just do one story. I would top up my prepaid SIM card every 2 years for like $15 with my Telstra SIM. Now, what that enabled me to do, this is crazy. People could call me and text me because the service was still like active, but I could just never call anyone or text anyone out and about. And used to drive my girlfriend crazy, but I didn't want to spend the money on credit. And this is the levels of craziness that my brain was in. And this is when I say I was laser focused. Like every spare dollar was going into this goal of reaching financial independence as soon as possible, because I wanted to be, I thought reaching the money goal was going to make me happy, but it doesn't really work like that. So I was crazy, right? Would I have been that crazy without the FIRE movement? Probably not, because I had what the FIRE movement did for me was like, there is a very obtainable goal that you can reach, Matt. Like you're in a position, you got a relatively good job out of uni, your expenses, your life expenses are super duper low. Like I was living at home for a few years, straight out of uni, so I could save so much money. I thought, I have an opportunity here. I have a window to like leapfrog my journey towards financial independence. And the support and the network and the stories that I was reading every single day of people in the FIRE community, which was all US based at that point, was inspiring me and pushing me forward. So that is definitely true. Now, having said that, I'm naturally frugal, and I was brought up similar to yourself. It sounds like I was naturally brought up to the mantra that my father instilled in me was that smart people save and invest their money. So I have a lot that I owe both my parents, mum and dad, because there was that investment talk around the dinner table. Now, that is something that I know a lot of people don't have. So I was fortunate to be in that position to get that information early on in life. My dad, in fact, he was sort of like, The Castle, the movie, where I think it's Daryl Kerrigan's like, tell him he's dreaming. Doesn't matter what the sun says, tell him he's dreaming. Tell him he's dreaming. My dad used to do that to me, but in like finance talk, whenever I bought something, it didn't matter how good of a deal I got. Whenever I bought anything, I'd rock up to, home with a new pair of shoes, a new t-shirt. He would laser in on it. He'd be like, how much you pay for that? And I'd say, whatever, 15, 20 bucks. And he'd always say the same thing, ripped off. Didn't matter how good of a deal I got, ripped off. So I don't know if he was doing it deliberately, but it's funny, like thinking back now, I was almost like, I don't want to spend any money because dad's going to say I got ripped off.
That's awesome.
But I think that a lot of people, and it's super hard. If you come into the movement and you're a natural spender, that's hard, man. That's really hard. And I just had a lot of things. Like I put my story online. I blog. I've been blogging about it for, nearly 10 years.
And where can we find that?
Just Aussie Fire. If you Google Aussie Firebug, the website's aussiefirebug.com.
Great. I'll put it in the show notes.
And appreciate that. This is a good rule of thumb to live by in general. Like never compare yourself to other people because you just don't know their situation. So I was very fortunate with a lot of different things because I lived in rural Victoria, which there's not a whole lot to do. If I'm in the city, like me and my wife lived overseas in the UK for 2 years. Holy moly, did we spend a lot of money. We spent unfathomable amounts of money and I was having a ball the whole time. But the point I'm getting at is it's a lot easier to save money when there are limited options.
Yeah.
Having said that, I did have to sacrifice some things, and probably like there was a few overseas trips with the boys that I didn't go on because I was like, no, like I've been on a trip before. I don't want to go on this, I don't want to spend this money. So it's not like you can reach financial independence within a decade or 15 years and not have sacrifices. Like it's that famous quote, you can have anything, but not everything. So I had to be selective with, what we're spending money on. But I think it was a big motivation for me to create my website because there was really no one talking about this in Australia back in 2015. And I was finding it a bit disheartening that I actually thought, I was like, is this even possible in Australia? Like different tax laws, different system. Like, can we actually do this FIRE thing that all these Yankees are doing overseas? So that was a big motivator for me. I think that you can do it without the community, but it does help a lot having people inspire you and spur you on.
Yeah, great. So I want to pick up on two sorts of threads here. One is that you're a parent now, and we've both shared sort of our parents' philosophies and how we learned from that. So I want to check in with you. How when your child is in high school and getting their first job, so my eldest son has his first job now, and he you can see his mindset shift when he's earned the money. All of a sudden, he doesn't want to spend it, which is great. He's assessing, is it worth spending money on? When it's my money, it's a free for all. What you've said, you used to be super frugal, but now you had a great time in London when you were there and spent lots of money and don't regret it. Where's the balance that you're going to pass on to your children, do you think? Is there sort of some optimizing you've done over your life where you think there's a sweet spot and that's what you want to pass on?
This is a good question and something I've been thinking about, but I need to do a lot more thinking.
It's hard, right?
So I'm in
the same dilemma literally right now. I have boys who like spending money, but at the same time, my eldest is very keen on making money as well. And there's also the idea, boy, you got to spend money to make money, right? He wants to start a business with his mates, buying collectible shoes, the sneaker trend, right? He's into basketball and reselling them. And I just want to encourage him that you need to spend money to make money, but also, $250 shoes is kind of a lot of money if you end up having to be stuck with them. So I'm in that dilemma. So what's your initial thoughts? Have you started, for example, a savings account for your child or a trust or anything like that? Is that crossing your mind yet?
Yeah, so I've got a few thoughts on this. So first of all, we have a daughter, little Elena, the apple of my eye. She looks like me as well. Daddy's girl, right? And
yeah.
I think, man, I melt when I look at her, Cam. And I feel like I'm going to spoil her. I know this is not the right answer. I know this is not the right answer. There is something fundamentally different in my brain, even though I don't have a son. I just feel like their relationship with money. Look, I'm going to teach all my kids because we're not stopping at one. We're going to have hopefully more. I'll hopefully teach them everything that I've learned that I think is important. It's going to be hard for me not to spoil this kid. I can see it already. And I just feel as though if I had a son instead of a daughter, the relationship would be slightly different. And that's, I don't know, that might sound crazy to some people, but,
no, it's true. I'll back you up there because I'm pretty good at being frugal and making the boys work for whatever they get. I have two sons. My wife is very much into spoiling them. And I know families with daughters, the daughter just has their dad wrapped around their little finger. And so it's a trade-off. It's up to the mum then to be strict on the daughter a little bit. I think that's totally normal there.
What I will say, like what I hope, this is what I hope, right? I will tell her, hopefully, I think spending money on yourself, and this is something that I wish, this is just very important. Anyone out there listening, especially if you're chasing fire, investing in yourself is the best investment you can make. It's not ETFs. It's not property, gold, whatever you're doing. Investing in yourself will pay off multiples. So what do I mean by that? Upskilling, education, a big one that I didn't figure out till later in life. Honestly, for me, everyone's experience is different, but for me, it was life-changing. Living overseas, working with different cultures, working with different people. I cannot tell you, and like people out there listening, how much more attractive of a candidate I am now from an employment point of view, now that I've got international experience and I've worked in my field overseas with multinationals, everything like that. Like it's not traveling. You can waste money traveling as well. So it's sort of like you have to be careful of what you say. But for me personally, investing in yourself is like you should never spare on investing in yourself. Now you want to be smart with it. You want to build up that cushion so you can then live the life that you want to live. And this comes back to the whole FIRE philosophy. And I love the story, Cam, you said about your son, when he earns the money, suddenly it's different, because that's exactly what happened to me. And it's funny because that's in the shoes. I had a similar story in the shoes. When we'd go to the skate shop, or like the surf
Yeah.
shop, there was 3 distinct areas of shoes. It was like the POV shoes, the middle, and then the high-end shoes. My dad would only ever shop from the middle to the POV area. I would only get the cheapo, slightly less cheapo. The Globes, the skate brand, like the brand new Globes, I always wanted them. And when I got my first job at Hungry Jack's, I remember thinking, man, I'm going to be earning like $150 a week. That's a new pair of Globes every week. I'm going to have the best shoes ever. And then as soon as you get the money, because you have given up your time, energy, life effort, suddenly the transaction is different. It's like, oh, that's not $150 anymore. That's, however many hours cooking burgers.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. But yeah. Back to your original question. Like, I'll teach all my kids what I know just about saving, investing, everything like that. But I want to really drill into them. Investing in yourself, get out there, worldly experiences, because I did that when I was in my late 20s. I just got overseas at 29. And I think, like, if you can study abroad, man, it opens up all sorts of pathways.
Yeah, terrific. I think I'm the same. Like my obviously neighborhood kids and my son's friends at a similar age, we often have conversations now that he's going into year 11 and 12. What do you want to do when you grow up, and what should you do after school? And I've also encouraged them, you got to go see the world. It's actually not expensive when you're young compared to especially compared to what you're costing your parents right now. They could just give you some money to get out of the house, and you would be frugal and you would have a good time. You'd meet people and you'd expand your view. I went to Canada when I was 19 for a year and worked in the ski fields and all that, and totally expanded my mind about what is even out there in the world. Like, how do you pick careers or navigate when all you've experienced is school and your local area, right? You know that there's a dentist and a doctor and a teacher and a couple of people, but you don't know about the world. So I totally am with you, and I'm going to share that with my kids. I want to two things before we wrap up. One, I just want some practical advice. When I see people borrow money to buy cars, I can feel it in my blood that this is a terrible idea to buy a depreciating asset with debt. And so I bought my most expensive car at age 37, spent $17,000, and really felt like this was a big cost, right? Even though our household income was great. If there's sort of 3 places to save money without affecting your lifestyle, where would they be? What's from your experience?
Housing, transport, and
let's just stick with
I'm gonna say holidays.
Oh, okay.
And
so housing, what's the secret?
So housing. We could have a whole podcast on this, and actually, definitely, because you've written many pieces of literature on housing. But I think, and this is the beauty of expanding, broadening your horizons by traveling. Aussie homes, as I'm preaching to the choir here because you're going to know this more than me, Cam. It's crazy how young people. All my mates bought like 4-bedroom homes on 1,000-meter square blocks when they were like 22, 23, because they were tradies. They just finished. They'd like loaded up with all this debt because everyone was doing it. It's like the new development in town. Oh yeah, Luke's got a block here. Ben's got a block here. Like everyone, I was close to doing the same thing. But if you're loading up on so much debt, maybe even best case scenario, it does pay off because it appreciates. So you do earn money, in 10 years, whatever. But you are severely restricting your ability to be agile within some of the most precious years of your life. So all your 20s, you're basically saying, I'm going to work my 40 hours minimum. I'm going to do overtime. I'm going to, do everything just so I can live in this big house in my town. I would say for people, if you want to save money, especially with housing, live within your means, be flexible, be nimble. For us, that looked like a 2-bedroom unit in my hometown that was costing $200 a week. Super cheap. Now I can hear people from Sydney and Melbourne screaming at me already. Like, that doesn't exist. I get it. It's things going to be more expensive in the cities. You know, it's sort of unavoidable, but just live within your means, housing, and don't do what everyone else is doing.
What about like share housing and things like that? Because I know we were share housing even until our first child was born, and a little after that, we was sharing with another friend who was separated, and so his son would come over. So we were very frugal on that front. It's kind of funny how our expectations have grown on housing in some respects.
Yeah, I think it's a good word. Expectations of what you should be buying and how grand it should be. I come from rural Victoria, and I just know that my mates, the houses are just mansions, like, especially worldwide standard. People don't understand. If they've never left Australia, they do not understand how amazing this house is. And what kills me is they're probably utilizing or using 15% of the house. The kitchen, the ensuite, their room, 3 bedrooms are just vacant for like 9 years. They might have a few friends stay over. Like, it's just such a waste of space, and you're paying a premium in your precious years in your 20s when you could be doing other things. So yeah, absolutely agree with you though. Share housing, that's another one that, like, your friends might look down upon you. Oh, you're a lawyer in the city. You should be, living in this fancy flat or fancy townhouse. It's like, no, I'm trying to save money. I'm doing what I can. Fantastic option. Just being like solving that problem. And there's a million different ways you can do it. Transport, secondhand cars that are reliable, nothing wrong with them. Don't get sucked into the status game. Do not get sucked into, I need to be driving a BMW because I want to give off this image. It's easy for me to say that because I met my wife quite early and I was never built that way. But I know some people, it's their identity. It's like if they come across the FIRE movement, it's like, but I'm the BMW guy. Like, I'm the Mercedes man. Like, that's me. I am that brand. So that would be a lot harder to do. But yeah, secondhand cars, safety is obviously important, but yeah, like, you pay such a premium for the brand and the look and how new it is, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Jump on a bike as well. If you live in the city, do you even need a car? Like, my God, when I was in London, just biked around everywhere. It was the best way to get around the city. It was the quickest. Anything over like 5Ks, okay, get the tube or whatever. But I could bike anywhere in the city under 5Ks quicker than anyone. It doesn't matter, Uber, anything. I was getting there quicker. So gets you fitter, saves money. It's like a triple threat. And that is like, biking is such a almost tenet of the FIRE movement because it hits on everything. It's the frugal option. It's the healthier option. It's the sustainable option. It's like, it's win-win-win across the board, right?
Yeah.
What was my third one? Holidays.
I often ride my bike thinking, how expensive is the bus when I could just ride for free? Like, that's,
and it's fun.
Sometimes that's the mindset. Yeah, no, it is fun. You notice what's going on in the street.
Dude, it's on a good day, a sunny day, it's a happiness machine. Like, I've been cycling for over a decade, and it is, I wish there was more bike lanes in my town that I lived in, put it that way, because I have been hit before.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's still a risk. I think Australia is improving there. London had a huge improvements with their bike lanes, and I've heard Paris in the last decade the same. So I think, like most things, Australia is 20 years behind. So we just need to be patient.
I was going to say that would be something I'd tell anyone in London. Boris Johnson, believe it or not, 2017, I believe he built this when he was the mayor. The super highways in London for the bikes, incredible. If you live in zone 1 or 2, the super highways straight into the city. Oh, it was a dream. Every morning, it was like the best part of my day almost, unless it was raining. So much fun on the super highways in London.
Yeah, I think the same philosophy could easily be adopted in Australia, and I know there's groups pushing for that in our cities. So, and isn't that a great way for councils to help people on their financial independence path by giving them these cheap options?
Absolutely.
Take away that status symbol of the car, save on the bus fare.
Yep. quicker,
Yeah.
it's healthier. It's like the populace is in better shape. Like it's just so many wins. Like the bike is, I could not say give it enough high praise, for councils and cities to start building better bike networks because it would just pay dividends.
Terrific. Well, I didn't read about cycling in Rich Dad Poor Dad 25 years ago, but it sounds like both of us have come to similar conclusions. Matt, we might wrap up there. I really appreciate your time. Can you just remind our listeners where they can find you? Because you do a podcast yourself and write a lot about the fire movement.
Yeah, so just Google Aussie Firebug. You'll find me on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcast. The website is aussiefirebug.com. I also have a pretty active Facebook group as well, the Australian Fire Discussion Group. So yeah, come check me out, come say hello, and yeah.
Terrific. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Cam.